Hello again, everybody. Great to have you along for yet another edition of Conversations of Connection. I'm Scott Murray.
Hi, I'm Dr.NinaRiosDoria, and welcome to Conversations of Connection. And it's all about mental wellness in sports and life, which I love.
It really is. It's a lot of fun to deal with something that we all have dealt with if we're an athlete, whether we're a professional athlete or just somebody out there that hops on the bicycle or runs in a race or something like you had a chance to do last week.
Yes, I did.
But you know, whether you play baseball, football, basketball, whatever it might be, it's getting out, getting the exercise, and not only the mind but the body as well.
Yeah, it's a good finding that balance.
Good balance. But of course, with this pandemic that we have all endured for the last year and a half.
Yes.
It's crazy. You know, you think about what 2020 was really all about and how it touched our lives and affected us as individuals and as families, in the home place, in the workplace, in our communities. It didn't much matter where we went. First of all, with the social distancing, we couldn't go a lot of places.
Right.
But we really couldn't be. The hugs and the handshakes disappeared, didn't they?
Yeah, a lot of disconnection.
Yeah,
and
very much so.
Today, and what I love that we're talking about just mental health today, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. And how are we learning to reconnect again and adapt and change? Because it's just a different world today.
Well, you talk about our emotions and something that we have talked about and certainly addressed since we were little kids, how we feel about things and how it's, we're taught in kindergarten to be nice and to be respectful to our classmates and what have you. But the anxiety and the depression and just the concern and of course, the S word, the suicides that we've heard about that have gone on during the pandemic, it really has become a different world, hasn't it?
It has, and I know right before the show we were talking about the statistics, and there was just a recent study done since COVID and the vaccinations and how are people doing, and it's really the young adult, 18 to 24, that are struggling especially with depression. It's right now they surveyed 22,000 young adults, and about 23% still are having thoughts of suicide. They also say parents with young children are really struggling today. So it's just still out there, the depression, the anxiety, and where do we go from here? How do we work on managing that?
Why do you think that is, Dr. Nina? What is it that are there one or two things that you can put your finger on and said, when you go through something like a pandemic that obviously we don't thankfully have to endure very much in our lifetime, but I mean, as you go through this, I've gone home and I've sat there, literally by myself and thought, what about this or what about that? Or I'll watch television and I'll hear about something on the news and I'll go, oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
Oh, where does all that come from? And especially for young people, the ages, you said, what, 18 to 24?
Yeah, 18 to 24, especially those are struggling with it.
That's the college years. When I was 17, 18, I was just beginning college. And then, of course, you're 23, 24, you're just getting out. I was at the time studying to be a doctor. I would have been going on to medical school had I,
you wouldn't be here right now.
That's probably true. But I just wondered, why is there something specific about that age group that's more so than people that are in their early 30s or in their 50s or even younger children?
You know what I think? You mentioned just something, watching TV or social media, what an influence that's having, unfortunately, in a negative way. And they just, actually an author we're going to be talking about later, Dr. Ethan Kross, who wrote the book Chatter, about the negative thoughts in our head, he had done a study about people on Facebook. And his study was, he would, there were people that participated, he would check on them 5 times a day about their social media and how they feel afterwards. And what he found are those that were on social media, like Facebook, their feelings they weren't feeling good. They were feeling more negative. And going back to your question earlier about why do you think this is that we are experiencing so much anxiety and depression? Well, we have to really be careful of what we're viewing. And unfortunately, a lot of social media, TV and stuff is a lot of negative. And so it can trigger a lot of emotion, a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear of the what ifs of the future, and just the fear of how do I reconnect? How do I live in a life that's kind of scary right now out there for some people? And so I think that's very influential on young adults today.
So we have what I have said for years, a little negative talk in our heads, but instead of a little negative talk, we've got a lot of negative talk.
Yeah, a lot of chatter.
Yeah, a lot of chatter, like little gremlins up there just causing issues.
Yeah.
Where does all that come from?
Well, it can come from the people that we associate with, and I think for you, I know you're very positive, but you're out. We're talking about being out in the community, connecting with people. But what type of people are you connecting with? And obviously, you do a great job connecting with great people, right?
Good people, positive people.
Yeah. So
Interesting. Interesting. There's so much to be said for that, and who you surround yourself with.
Yeah, who you surround yourself can be influential, and then when just recognizing the chatter that goes on in our head. And once you do, what do you do with that chatter? You know, one of the things Dr. Ethan Kross is based on a lot of his science. He has a lab up at U of M, which I told you about.
Right.
And it's how do we regulate emotion? How do we practice self-control? And so he does a lot of research and studies. And what he found is, you know, it's okay. Like, let's say you come home with your wife and you just vent about something. You're just frustrated. It's great to vent. But if that's all you're doing, it's not going to be healthy for you. And you're going to leave the conversation frustrated.
You're venting, but that's a negative. If you vent just to say, hey, we've got an issue, we've got a problem, let's resolve this, let's have not confrontation, let's have conversation, and let's get it out and put it on the table and resolve this situation. Yeah. But you're right. If you continue on and it's just negative,
right?
That's not how it's not going to get better like that. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, going back to the people that you surround yourself with, one of the things they found is if you have a problem and you're frustrated and you want to talk to somebody about it, make sure it's somebody that can listen, that can validate your emotions, but then offer you another perspective, help you to see the bigger picture so that you're not ruminating on negative thoughts and the stress. And so it's important. I like that.
I like that.
So if you're out there and you have someone coming to you to talk about something stressful, validate them, listen. Listening is really important, but also help them see a bigger picture. Not so much this is what you need to do, not the advice, but have you considered this? Or have you looked at this? Or what are some thoughts that you can do that are going to help you be in a better place? Just help them brainstorm better ways to deal with it versus just saying, oh, that's wrong, yeah, that's bad. And they get off the phone and they're just frustrated and ruminating and negative thinking.
Funny you say listening. The good Lord gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't understand gee, I never thought of that.
Yeah.
It's a good thing to listen occasionally instead of doing all the talking. Yes?
Yeah, like think about in your marriage, just listening to each other. I mean, you've been married for many years, and just the skill of listening and with your family and your kids, I'm sure that plays a big role in just healthy relationships for you all.
Absolutely. Well, today we don't have a guest with us. Sometimes we will, sometimes we won't. We've had some wonderful guests. Michelle Staubach, Roger Staubach's daughter, who's dealt with some issues on mental wellness and what have you, and has been so positive about sharing her message to help those to maybe understand what she went through, and maybe they might be going through something very similar, and say, hey, you know what? When I was there, this is something I did. Or when I was there, I tried this. And it's really great to have people like that want to make a difference. Charles Haley was a guest. You know, 5-time Super Bowl champion. You know, 3 rings with the Cowboys, a couple with the San Francisco 49ers, and yet bipolar the better part of his life, and really didn't, I don't know if he didn't know it or didn't admit it, but I think it's more that he really didn't address it and didn't know it. But he was kind of a tough guy to get along with in the locker room and what have you. And I know a lot of members of the media didn't want anything out of that. Haley, he's a pain in the neck. Yeah, I don't want to deal with him.
Yeah.
And even to the potential of having just a going one-on-one with him. You don't want to do that. It serves no purpose.
Right.
And I just, I don't know if it was all the years that I spent in college with my major, which was psychology, but just kind of understanding where he was coming from, and there are some issues there. And I don't think he's the bad guy that everybody thinks he is.
Yeah.
And now Charles has asked me to do 6 of these one-on-one talks that we've gone to large gatherings in auditoriums, in convention centers and what have you, and talked about what he's had to endure. How you lose your wife, you lose your kids, you lose your family. It's not the way it's, and now how he's saying, come on, let's get it back, let's get it right. This is what I've had to endure, and the message he shares now is just wonderful.
Yeah.
And helping others out there that are having to deal with some of the same things that he's had to deal with for a number of years.
Right. And, sharing that story with everybody, I think one thing you might want to kind of talk to everyone about is you were able to kind of connect with Charles Haley, and a lot of reporters at that time couldn't. And I think he was really struggling. And I'm curious what you think helped y'all connect, helped him be vulnerable and open with you, because I think that would help viewers deal with those people with strong personalities like someone like him.
I think, and I've felt this a long time. My parents both taught me this: don't sit in judgment on others.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people are too quick to jump to conclusions. Oh, he's a pain in the neck. Oh, I'm not going to deal with him. And yet you kind of step back and say, wonder what it is that's causing him to respond like that, to react like that, to just be the way. What is he doing? Whether it's Charles or whoever it might be. I'm not just zeroing in on Charles, because he's become a dear friend. But it's just, I think it's having patience and being understanding, being kind, courteous, and respectful to those that need a helping hand. And again, 2 ears, 1 mouth, listening to what they have to share, and then maybe together, collectively figuring out, well, gosh, moving forward, what do you think would work for you? What would make you feel better? Or what could I do to make you feel better? So that they see that there is a helping hand being extended to them.
Yeah.
And it's just up to them to reach out and say, okay, I can listen to that. I understand what you're trying to share with me. Let's figure it out.
Yeah, I love it. I love that the key is, you said listening quite a bit,
Right.
and then asking the questions, the questions that help them think about what they need to do.
Absolutely.
But the power of listening, I know I have clients that come in, and the young adults, especially the teenagers, are like, my parents aren't listening to me. But the parents believe they really are trying to listen, but often listen is giving advice, and they just really want to feel heard and understood. And often it's just paraphrasing what they're saying or validating their feelings so that they feel heard and understood. It's sometimes that simple, and so needed today is to listen and to show grace and love. And how do we listen? And it's really validating their feelings and helping them ask the questions like you did, like you just mentioned. All that can play such a powerful role as a parent and just as a friend, to be a friend to somebody in that way.
Yeah, this show is not political, and we don't want it to be political.
Yeah.
But just look at our world, and people don't listen. They're not kind and respectful of others. Okay, what is it? How do you feel about things? Okay, well, here's how I feel about it. Well, let's come together and figure out how we can come up with a solution to whatever the dilemma is that's in front of us, so it works for you and it works for me. And then together, it's a win-win.
Yeah.
It's a win-win. We all benefit. But unfortunately, we're not in a world like that right now.
Right. It's a tough, there's a lot of disagreements, a lot of, black and white. And that's another thing is, we talk about the chatter and the negative thinking that can trigger anxiety and stress. When it's black and white, it's hard to see the gray. And so one of the things I do with clients is, let's look at the gray. How do we see the gray? Like, pull back, step back from this conversation, this situation, and how do you see the gray in it? Because sometimes when we're so in it, that's when the ruminating thoughts come and the negative thinking. How do we step back and see the broader picture and see in gray? And you probably see a lot of gray, and I'm wondering how you're able to see gray a lot, because maybe you can help people that aren't seeing gray.
Well, I think I've always tried to play devil's advocate.
Okay.
I'm great at my kids would tell you the first time. Dad always tries to look at, now my kids are grown up now, but they always tries to look at the other side. Okay, well, what about so-and-so? And so I have, no matter what the dilemma or the situation or the scenario is in front of me, I always try to play devil's advocate. And I always try to think about, what is it they're thinking? How can it be such a positive for them over there? Or how can it be such a negative for them over there when I see just the opposite? What is it? Okay, how can I understand what they're doing? So I try to always, and it's amazing if you open up your mind and open up your arm and open up your hands and let people know that you're accepting of what they want to share with you. Not that you necessarily agree with it.
Right.
But that you are a good listener. And again, the 2 ears and the 1 mouth.
Yeah.
Then they're saying, ooh, I'm not getting the pushback. He's not standing there with
he's not ready to be reactive.
A machine gun to let go. And I think that's most important. And that, to me, is the difference between being confrontational and being conversational.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And that's the key. How about you? Let me ask you this.
Sure.
You're a psychologist. You have dealt with both the general public and athletes. So I wondered, and all my years in television, for whatever reason, I always asked about what are the 3 things that come to mind? And I would always say, no. How about your dad? What are the 3 things you learned from your dad? How about your coach? What's the best advice your coach gave you? What are the top 3 things you get? So I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
3 things.
Oh,
3 things.
Okay.
What are the 3 things that you have been exposed to or have been addressed in your direction as a PhD, as a psychologist, that people say, it wasn't like this before the pandemic, and going forward now, today, I need help with bing, bing, bing. What are there 3 things that come to mind that have really been prevalent out there that you say to anybody that's watching today, that a family member or a friend down the street or a coworker has dealt with? I just wondered, are there some things that have really become very obvious during this entire COVID-19 pandemic that, boy, this wasn't like this a year and a half ago. Is there anything to...
You know what? A couple things stand out to me just right away. Again, I know we're talking about anxiety, but it's just, I think every client on some level is managing anxiety from the pandemic. Yeah. The anxiety that was triggered, the fear, the worries, the what ifs of the future, financially, relationships, with school, with being an athlete, playing sports. That's one. Comparison, but what has happened to them after the pandemic and comparing themselves to others, which can happen on social media a lot. And that can trigger depression. So that the comparison piece, and I'm hearing this person's here, or I'm looking, they're all happy, and I'm struggling. See that comparison. So going back to that social media piece, that's something we talk about.
And that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Are you? Now I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Are you a big proponent of social media? I play around with social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever.
So I have.
I just wondered, positive or negative though? Do you like?
Well, I have a professional Facebook only, and then I have my LinkedIn and my professional Instagram, and I'm not really not good on it very often, but I set it up for business. But other than that, I'm not on it as much. I'm not on it for that, and for the reasons I just mentioned. I just need to be really careful with my mental health if I'm helping people with their mental health. And unfortunately, there's just a lot of negativity out there, so you have to be careful about what you see and what you're
totally understand, and very much in agreement. And that's basically what I do. I don't put anything that has anything to do with my family, really. My son got married, and I see, something that he does professionally that's, or now my new daughter-in-law does something, I'll put that on there. I'm proud that I can share it. But it's usually not family stuff. It's usually something that was professional, where they did something successfully in the professional world. And I do the same thing with myself, as you said, LinkedIn. Share information about incredible organizations that I've gotten a chance to MC an event or be a part of. And I say, hey, how about this group? Or how about this group? Or, gee, look what they're doing for children.
And I think, go ahead.
Yeah, well, that's a positive to me,
absolutely,
Nina. But I just, but a lot of times it's not like that. It's who can I take a shot at, or how can I hose this person or do this? And I don't understand that. What purpose does that serve? How can that make somebody feel good about themselves taking shots at somebody else like that in public in social media?
Well, it's always safer to do behind the computer, right?
Well, that's for sure.
It's always safer to do that. So I always say have those sensitive conversations in person or face-to-face.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But it's obviously you're very intentional and careful how you use social media, and I think in a positive way. It's like, why do we post the things we do? Why do we do what we do? And just that we're checking in with ourselves, that we're doing it from a good place. I think that's always good.
You want to have a conversation with somebody, go have a conversation with them. Don't hold your conversation so the whole world knows what you're talking about.
Yeah. You asked me something else I wanted to share, because I think that we can be all guilty of this, is what expectations do we put on ourselves as an athlete, as a person? I should do this. I must do this. I'm supposed to be at this place. And that triggers a lot of anxiety for my clients and athletes. And so we kind of talk about if you're often not reaching that expectation you set on yourself, and you're always discouraged and depressed, then maybe it's time to change it, modify that expectation to make it more realistic so you feel more hopeful and happy. But also change the wording. That word I should, or I must, or I have to can trigger anxiety. So
shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Yeah, like I should be at this next meeting, and then you just feel this guilt sometimes. So we work with my clients on what words when we use the word should, must, have to, just modifying that word, such as like, I hope to be at that meeting. I hope that I can do this that I committed to, I plan to, but just really be careful with the words you choose as you do this self-talk to yourself, because that's such influential on how we build confidence, on how we affect our self-esteem, just that self-talk, which many athletes, we work on that for sure all the time. We
both have spent our entire adult life with athletes, and for the most part, professional athletes. Me as a broadcaster, as a sports anchor, you as a psychologist. I just wondered, now in this world, with all that the athletes, and I'm speaking, well, you can say professional athletes, but also collegiate athletes. The fact that some of the schools, they didn't have the seasons that they had planned to have, and the bowl games were a little different last year. Just the whole dynamics of it, and people in the stands or nobody in the stands, and playing an NBA game or an NHL or a baseball game. And it was just till recently the Texas Rangers here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area finally opened up the stadium. What a great concept. To have people there.
New appreciation, right?
Well, I just wondered, you've talked to the athletes, you've talked to some of these professional athletes and what it's been like for them to endure all they have in the last year and a half. I just wondered, anything that fascinated you or anything you were surprised by or anything they shared that you might want to share with our audience?
Well, one thing, I think that's a good question. I think that I want to share something that's been helpful, and then I think that can be helpful for all of us is one of the things that helped a lot of college athletes, and there was a research done on this with the NCAA college athletes, is that the coaches that checked in on them, that they kept the connection relationships going.
So there was the relationship there, even though they didn't come to practice every day. And
the coaches that checked in, the athletes that connected, that really helped them with their mental health, really made them feel better. And so I think the importance, the value of connection, the sending a text, calling somebody, even today, that social support is really important.
Exactly what our title of our show is, Conversations of Connection.
Yes.
And that's exactly what you're saying.
Yes.
But that was not the coach's job. His job is to teach them to be good athletes, to go out in the field and win ball games.
Yeah, so it's a different shift for them. They had to adapt
How
to that.
fascinating.
Yeah.
That's great to hear that.
Yeah, so coaches are extremely influential, but that goes for all of us. We can really be influential on the people around us because there's a lot of people struggling. I told you I have people in my office that people would think that they're just so happy. They look great, check the box with, they seem like they're just a great person. They're doing well in work, but yet they're really struggling with depression, and they just take off the mask and they're exhausted when they get home. And so we think that somebody's okay, but often they're not. So when you feel that nudge to check in with somebody, I encourage you to do that.
So
do you ever feel that? Do you ever feel that nudge to check in on somebody?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Quite often.
I bet you're calling people all the time.
I don't know about that.
Yeah. With your circle, right? You have a great circle of people that that really help each other.
Yeah, it's funny. I never really thought about it until you brought that up, but that's true. And you'll have different ideas that you'll toss about. Well, I did this with so and so, or wait, did you ever try this?
Yeah.
And people will exchange ideas too, which is also very helpful.
Yeah.
And they've shared results. Gee, well, I did this, and this is how they responded. And you go, really? Oh, gee, I'll have to try that with such and such.
Yeah.
So I think that's good. And again, back to the coaches. Coaches almost playing a parental role.
Absolutely.
Almost playing not just coach, but dad, or mom, or whatever the case might be. I think that's great.
It is. And coaches have such a huge role, and they have so much responsibility. I really admire their role. And, another area we're looking into is, how do we help the coaches now? What athletes are talking about mental health. Let's help the coaches with their mental health because they need it too. So we're looking into that as well.
Do you see athletes as involved as they were at one time? I remember in the day of, growing up, the Roger Staubachs and what have you, and then I got into the business and covered people like a Troy Aikman, who now is retired, but in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, a member of that 100, that century team of the Cowboys, not of the Cowboys, of the NFL. One of the top 100 players in the 100-year history of the NFL. 1920 to 2020.
Wow.
And all that they do also from a standpoint of being philanthropic. I created the Jason Witten Award about 4 years ago, and I did so. It's now the College Man of the Year Award. Well, it's not just based on what he does on the field or what he has done on the field. It's based on what he is as a person.
Yeah.
As a leader, and having to lead with the proper integrity and character and just being a good guy and making a difference. And he certainly does that off the field with his foundation. I've worked with him with the Boys and Girls Clubs, with his own foundation, and he's always there to make a difference. And usually in the life of a child. And aren't children the ones that need it most? Think of something better than making a difference in the life of a child.
Well, I think that's a big part of helping you with your mental health. And that's something you do a lot. You're always giving of, supporting nonprofits and, of people that give back. When Charles Haley was in, what he said, it was so interesting. He said when he struggles with depression at times. When he gets sad, he said, I get out of bed. He can choose to sit there, but he's like, I get out of bed, I go to Starbucks, and I go buy somebody a coffee. But he shows kindness.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of.
But it makes him feel good too.
It makes him feel good.
Yeah.
It makes him feel good. He's giving back. And that's something that will improve mental health and well-being is how do we show kindness, give back to the community as you do. And that can just really just make you feel overall better about yourself. And Charles Haley was a great example when he shared that.
You never know the lives you're, gosh, I don't want this to sound self-serving, the story I'm about to share, but I used to do a program on TV called Scott's Kids. And I was on the board of Big Brothers Big Sisters, and they wanted to do a program that was done in a lot of major markets like a Dallas-Fort Worth, but there was nothing like this here, where you would take an adoptive child, or a child, not an adoptive child, but a single-parent family child, and go out and do something. And so we started doing that every Tuesday, and we'd air it at 10 o'clock, and I would go out and they could do this or do that, or what would they like to. One little boy's name was Ryan, and so he wanted to meet Nolan Ryan. So we went to the ballpark, and here's Nolan's. It was great. Yeah. But there was a little girl, and that's the gist of this story. I was doing a thing with Terry Bradshaw at SMU about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, and this woman came up to me as Terry and I were getting off the stage. She said, "Mr. Murray," and down below, and Terry said, "Go ahead and talk to her." I went down there, and she said, "Hi, I just wanted to say hello to you." And she offered her hand, and she said, "I was one of your Scott's Kids." Yeah, and this woman was like 8 years old when she did that, but she was now about 33, 34. She was an attorney here in town. And she had come from a pretty tough family.
Right.
And didn't have a dad. And she said, "You told me to always believe in myself and never give up, even though the going would get tough."
Powerful. Yeah.
You don't realize the impact you have. And I was so proud of her. I said, "You're an attorney." It just totally blew me away. Yeah. You never know the lives you touch and the difference it can make. And I can only imagine the lives you've touched that have done the same thing for young people.
Well, I think your story is a beautiful story about you never know the words, the power of words, the people in your life, just picking up the phone, reaching out, especially right now, checking in with your kids that seem like they're okay, but if they're upstairs in the room with the door shut, maybe not. Just checking in with them, and if they're not talking, you can still show acts of kindness and be kind and encouraging to them, because it does make a difference.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. I one of the things that I love making up poems and little slogans and what have you. And one of the things that I've always closed one of my radio shows with was making a difference in the lives of people. And it says, "Live your life as a go-getter," which my parents always used to tell me, but share your life as a go-giver.
Yeah, I love it.
And that's the key, is to making a difference in the lives of those that need it most. And boy, there are a bunch out there that need it most. Just go down any major city, you see the homeless, you see, it's so sad. But so much of this, deals with a good parenting and adults taking the time to help a child in need. And there are so many out there.
Yeah, and that is that's influential, and just making sure that people that are listening today, that we do have control over our thoughts and our emotions. And when we're struggling a lot, we just shared some tips today, but if they're still struggling, to reach out to a mental health counselor. And if you don't have a support system, I know that you obviously talk about some great people you can talk to. Make sure the people that you're venting to, the people that when you're stressed out, that you have people that are not only going to validate and listen, but really help and support you and encourage you and help you see a bigger picture. If you don't have those people, create a little support group, because that is so helpful as we work on our mental wellness every day, daily. I think that's a really great thing to have.
No, absolutely. We talked a little about suicide earlier today, and do you have a number off the top of your head? Is there any number that people call, or if they have any,
There's the 1-800 suicide hotline that they can call and reach out to.
That's what I wondered.
And then
if you knew of someone that you just thought potentially had thoughts of suicide or whatever, whether they're 8 years old or 18 years old, what would you tell them?
Well, there's people that if you have suicidal ideation, which is just thoughts of it, but you don't have a plan in place or anything, you're just having thoughts. That's time for just obviously to meet with a counselor and to work through some stuff, because you're struggling with depression. But obviously, if it's more severe, then it's something to get involved. They might need to go into the hospital and get checked in if they're absolutely suicidal. Unfortunately, I've known people in my life or people that have been struggling with depression and suicide, and for parents that are needing what to do, they feel so helpless.
Right.
It's very emotional when their child is struggling with suicidal thoughts. But just constantly just checking in and being there for them and getting them the appropriate help will help comfort them and give them some security, because a parent can't do it by themselves.
All right.
It's tough out there, but there are strategies and there's things that people can begin to do. And again, finding the right people to surround yourself with.
Well, you kind of went right to where I was going to take us here, because it's time to wrap things up.
Yeah.
So I just wondered, the message that you might share with us. You're the doctor. You have the PhD at the end of your name.
Yeah.
So share with our viewers, our listeners, what it is that would be the parting gift we might share with them about conversations of connection, and how they can make sure they continue to make their mental wellness a positive scenario in their life, that they're staying positive, that they're being productive and passionate about who they are and what they're all about, believing in themselves, respecting themselves, and just being themselves in a really positive, productive way. What comes to mind? What can they do?
What you mentioned, one of the things you said, you have a passion in life, have a passion. Well, today, last year, you might have different, what life looked like for you and the meaning in life might be different today. And it's when you're feeling lost and confused and unsure, that can trigger a lot of emotion, anxiety, and stress. So one of the things I work on with clients is, let's look at, what brings you meaning in life, what gives you value. Because when we find value for us, that's where hope shows up.
Interesting.
And we need hope to kind of live a purposeful, passionate
absolutely.
life.
Absolutely.
So I definitely think let's focus on, what is life about for you today? Find meaning, find what's valuable, what's important to you, and that can trigger a lot of hope and energy and excitement. And it's nice to see that transition when I work with clients.
My father used to always say to me, because you can. And I think that's important. Don't give up.
Yeah.
Because you can. He'd
Love
throw me a ground ball. I'd muff it. He'd say, that's all right. You can get it. You sure, Dad? Yep, because you can.
Love it.
Because I can. Because we can make it happen. So, folks, if there's any closing thought, it is, please know, because I can. Not me, but you. Because you can. Thank you.
Yeah,
You're great. I love your wisdom.
Yes,
I love
it's
all
been
that you continue to share with us.
Yeah, well, thank you for your life experience. That's something to and all that you share. So we hope that some of these things have been great for you all.
Yep. And until next time, and we have a couple of people that are right here they'd like to come join us. So we're not going to tell you who they are, but I'll tell you this: you'll know them, and you'll go, "Ooh, a little wow factor there, folks! Way to go!" So that's good news. So thank you, Nina.
Yeah, it's been great.
Dr. Nina. So until next week for Conversations of Connection, I'm Scott Murray.
And I'm Dr. NinaRiosDoria.
So long, everybody.
Bye-bye.